All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Nikki and Brie Show. And Nikki and I are so excited for today's episode. We already, our brains are working like crazy. We have so many questions for our next guest. You're just in for a treat. You're going to love this one. We are lucky enough to have Annie Elise on the podcast today. She has her own podcast that I know a lot of you listen to, Serialously. I think I nailed that.
I think you nailed it.
I nailed
Good job.
it. We all know I have a hard time with S's, so that was like
and L's.
And L's. That was a big moment for me.
Yeah, wasn't perfect, but it was really good.
Right,
9 out of 10. Brie.
I know. With Annie Elise, she also has a YouTube series, 10 to Life on YouTube, and she has Instagram and TikTok at _Annie Elise. And Annie, thank you so much for coming on the Nikki and Brie Show.
Yes.
Hi, you're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, we are so excited to talk to you. We've actually never had anyone who deals with true crime or dissects it or anything like that on our podcast.
No.
But Nikki and I are very into it. So to be able to have you on the podcast and pick your brain, we're so excited. But, we have to ask you, what made you want to get into true crime, telling these stories and finding these stories and being able to have a podcast? Your TikTok's fascinating. I love your TikTok, by the way. Your Instagram, telling these stories. What made you want to get into it?
Honestly, it's kind of random and happened by chance. I've been into true crime for as long as I can remember, probably too young, if I'm being honest, watching Dateline, 60 Minutes, all of these different documentaries. And my sister and I were very close, as you guys are, not twins, but very close. And we would have our Dateline Fridays where we'd literally get froyo. We would watch Dateline and we would talk about things. And so I was living in New York back in 2020, and I was in the fashion industry doing trend forecasting. And then when COVID hit, all the factories shut down, everything was just put on pause. That's also right when TikTok first started coming out. And I just felt like I needed to fill my days with something. And I don't have hobbies. I just don't. I'm not somebody who works out. I don't have knit. I just have no hobbies. So all I do is really watch true crime documentaries. So my husband was like, well, why don't you just start talking about some of these cases that bother you and that you have questions about? And I was like, okay. So I just literally turned my phone on, started having conversations with the internet as though I was talking with my sister after a Dateline episode, just kind of talking about the red flags I see when I did a deep dive into their social media, what I found, because I felt like with a lot of the stuff out there, it's very topical and almost the delivery is somewhat clinical, where it's I want to know all the details. I'm nosy. I want to know everything about it. So I started talking about these cases and it just skyrocketed. And so a few years into it, I was juggling both fashion and doing TikTok and YouTube. And then I quit, pursued true crime full time, started the podcast, and here I am.
Wow.
Wow, that's so cool.
It's so incredible. And, I read that a big part of you doing this is that you want to give the victims the kind of their voice being heard. You feel like sometimes the murderers, I hate saying that, are sometimes get more of the spotlight, and that you want to give the spotlight to the victims, which I literally, it gave me goosebumps when I was reading that.
It's true. I feel like so many times, whether it's a series, a documentary, or even now all of these series that are being remade on Netflix, the perpetrator is platformed and people are more fascinated with them. And then the victim's voice, it just gets lost in it. And you don't really know about where did they go to school? What were their friendships like? What was their favorite color, their hobby? And so when we do our coverage over on whether it's YouTube or the podcast, we want to just give you a full understanding of who the victim was, let their voice, as you said, allow to continue to be heard and raise awareness, hopefully, so that other people don't end up a potential victim in the future.
Right.
Wow.
I see. And I love that. The raising awareness. And it's so crazy because that is one of the things I have found the beauty in TikTok is it's brought out these amazing detectives and what they figure out when either it's public court cases that we're watching or documentaries. I love how you all are finding the holes and gaps in it, or raising awareness and also giving the victims a voice and being like, look, this is who this person is. I have a question. What are some of the most questions people will DM you about or tune into the YouTube? Do you get a lot of questions about these different series?
Absolutely. One of the ones that I just most recently had so many DMs about was, of course, the Gabby Petito story, because that was, everybody had talked about it for years, of course, but then Netflix just dropped I think it was a 3-part docuseries on it. And I had covered that case quite a bit, but another point for me whenever I choose what cases I'm talking about, I want to make sure I'm adding value to them some way and not just exploiting the story or trying to, platform the salacious details. And so
I
I had
like that
covered
better.
Gabby, but not in a big way, only because I was like, there's so much coverage out there. I don't think that I can give a different perspective. But then when this Netflix series dropped, I was like, wait a minute, they're leaving out a lot of key information, which so many people don't know is that when after the Moab incident that was caught on the body cam
Right.
footage, Brian actually flew home to Florida for 6 days before returning to Salt Lake City. And
Really?
during that 6 day window, Gabby was at a hotel alone. And that's when she started reaching out to her ex, which we did here on the docuseries. And when she started putting a plan in place to leave, he got home, or I'm sorry, he returned to Salt Lake one day after she sent that text message. So, what I had talked about when I did this new episode is we talk a lot about not only giving them a voice, but how can people prepare to leave dangerous situations? How can you, as a friend, be supportive for people in those situations or know what signs to look for? So, in situations like that, it's like he came back one day after she sent that message saying she was putting a plan in place. She really didn't have an opportunity to fully execute it. He was back, he was in her face, he was probably, I believe, going through her phone. And I think that ultimately was the catalyst and what ended up happening just a couple of days later. But I think that had she had a little more time on her own, then maybe there would have been a different outcome. So, talking about things like that, and that was one of the most requested ones recently to answer your question, because everybody's like, why aren't they talking about this piece of information or, this detail over here? And so, I try to do like the deep dives into
Yeah.
everything so that you have all the
I
information.
love that. And why do they leave stuff like that
I was
out?
going to say, because I watched the documentary just last week
Mhm.
and I didn't know a lot of information, but I was fascinated by the story. So I watched the 3-part series and I didn't even know that. I didn't know he flew back. I didn't know she was in a hotel for 6 days.
I know. I think sometimes they leave it out. I don't know if I mean, of course, the most obvious answer with a lot of these documentaries is the time constraint. And so they feel like with interviews and other pieces of information, and that might take priority. I also noticed that with the recent Ruby Frankie documentary. But I think, too, there's another part of it where maybe they don't feel it's as important to the storytelling, or that it could possibly be construed as then an opportunity for victim blaming. Because I would imagine if that was included, some of the talk and conversation could potentially go in the direction of, well, if she was away from him for 6 days, why didn't she leave? She had the opportunity, which it's like, unless you know that and have been in a situation like that, it's like, it's not that easy. That's not
Right.
how it works. And so it might be better in situations like that to where you exclude that information so that that isn't the narrative that gets spun.
Oh, that's actually, I didn't even think of that. And people would do that because
Right.
everyone always
Yeah,
thinks they know what they would do best in that situation. It's like you don't know until you're in it. And it really
exactly.
opened up my eyes, the cops, their body cams. That whole situation rubbed me the wrong way. It
It was horrible.
it was horrible. And I was like, I can't even believe like this could have been a turning point and changed the and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it could have changed so much for her if the cops handled that situation differently. I almost had to turn it off because I'm like, I can't even watch this because I've seen women in this situation so many times and it just ugh. And seeing him like kind of laugh and make some comments and the, it
Calling her
just
crazy.
yep.
I know. I
Oh,
agree. And she was terrified. You could tell whether she was
terrified.
the aggressor or not, as they labeled her. It's like she was shaking, she was trembling, she was scared. She was talking about how he doesn't believe in her. Anyone with two eyes and a brain could see what was going on in that situation. And even if she was admitting to being the aggressor, then it's my opinion they should have arrested her and put her in jail. And then maybe she would have reached out to her parents and they would have separated that way. But it's like they just kind of did the bare minimum from what I was seeing, and siding with him, laughing with him, like he's calling her crazy and they're laughing. It was disgusting. It was
It
truly
was.
disgusting.
And I was like, someone called and saw him slapping her. It's like,
Exactly.
I'm like, that is a person didn't call because he knows them and he wants to get the guy in trouble. He had zero recollection who they were. He saw it.
Mm-hmm.
He felt it was dangerous. So he called the cops. And I'm like, how was that not a big, I don't know. I can go on forever with that. But like, how was that not a
I know.
big thing when the cops were
Right.
talking about
No,
everything?
it's frustrating.
It is. And it must like, cause you give so much detail and you dissect these true crime stories. Is it hard on you? Because, like you must like really get into it and then feel so bad for the victim.
Yeah, it's definitely very tough, especially because not only just how deep this content goes, I'm a mother as well. I have two young kids, a 3.5 and a 5-year-old. And so a lot of these cases that involve children too are especially hard. It's like
Mm.
how you can just pull yourself away for a moment to then be present with your family. It can be very challenging. But at the end of the day, and it sounds so cheesy and so cliche, so I'm just going to throw that out ahead of time,
Yeah.
but it's like, I know that it's making a difference and that the families are appreciative of the coverage. I've had families not only reach out to me after an episode, but reach out asking me to cover their loved one's case. There is an event which is so crazy, but it's called Crime Con. It's kind of like a Comic Con where it's all, NBC comes, Dateline, all these different platforms. And I've had families come up and say, like, thank you so much for your coverage, or how'd you get that specific detail? They didn't even talk about that in the courtroom and it wasn't in the documents. How'd you find that out? And so knowing that they appreciate it and that there's value there, it's almost like I just try to like muster up whatever, I don't even know if you would say strength or what it is, to just
Yeah.
like to share these stories and be the voice for them. And then I always say that if we can at least hear or say what these victims went through, which is a fraction of what they went through, it's like the least we can do is hear about it then and allow their story to carry on if they're the ones who had to experience
Oh,
this.
that
Totally.
is so
And
true.
I think it's definitely strength on your part as well as bravery. I think it's incredible that you do this for the victims and their families. And it's neat in life when you find your purpose. And it's crazy sometimes how that comes about, like the pandemic and you were in fashion and then this came here. And you do realize it is needed. These things need to be heard. And what I love what you do on top of it all is just raising the awareness and taking that extra step. Because growing up, like Brie and I have always been so aware about things. But like when I had my girlfriends and even how they would walk to their car alone at night, I'm like, wait, where's your spray? Where, like, you walk up straight, look around, have keys in between your fingers. Like, I just remember, like, there are so many people in this world that are not aware of how they should be or their
The
surroundings.
yeah,
And
exactly.
I do,
I
wait, real
agree
quick. I have one
completely.
question about a case that the world fell in love with this past year, the Menendez brothers. Did you cover that?
I did a little bit, not in a deep dive way, because again, I was like, I don't know what lens I can necessarily put on this that
Yeah.
makes it different from what everybody's heard, but I am very well versed in the case and I have a lot of thoughts.
Are they like, I mean, I don't even know really what I'm going to be asking, but
Guilty or not guilty? Is that what
yeah,
you're
I
asking?
guess pretty much like I know, I understand, with the parents and like, then you have, other people come out about their dad, like since the case. And so it's so hard on knowing like how to feel about them. Right.
I didn't watch it.
I agree. I agree. And that's kind of where I sit. I'm very torn because back when all of this happened with them, child sexual abuse was something that was never really talked about,
Mhm.
especially when it had to do with little boys or with parents and their children. It was just more of a taboo topic. So it's like people weren't educated on it, they weren't hearing much about it. But then, so there's no doubt that I think some abuse was definitely taking place inside that home. Not that that necessarily excuses a double murder.
No.
I think that there are other, ways they could have gone about it. I also think too that when you look at the pattern of their spending history right after the deaths and their behavior, again, everyone reacts differently in situations like that and grieves differently, but it kind of looked more as though this was financially motivated rather than retaliation for abuse. I'm not saying that there wasn't
Yes.
abuse. And I know that there was a letter too that was written to a cousin confiding in this, which was after the fact. So I'm kind of the I sit where it's like, if they end up being released, I think they've done their time. I don't think that they are a threat or a danger to society anymore at this point. But do I think that they should have maybe never been charged? I don't think so. I think
Yeah.
that unfortunately, a lot of people I see daily go through situations like this, and there are other methods of escape and getting out of these situations, not a double murder and then
For sure.
spending, 700 grand or whatever it was within 48 hours.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's wild. Yeah. That's
I
such
agree.
great insight. I
And I
agree
think
with
that's
you.
where everyone felt torn, is because it's
Mhm.
like you felt one way because you think, oh, these sweet little boys and what happened to them, which could have caused the mental, dysfunction. But at the same time, you're like, but I mean, you walk through the door, you blow your parents away. Like, that's a different thing,
Yeah.
So I felt so torn in that. And, you know, to go back when you were talking about, because you are a mom and being a wife, what is it that you do to decompress or kind of be able to get yourself out of the energy of doing true crime and then the energy of being a mom and a wife?
Honestly, I wish I had an answer for that. And I think that is probably one of the most asked questions I get is how do you turn it off? And I don't think I do it in a healthy way. I'm just going to be
Mm.
honest. Like, I have a way of knowing how to compartmentalize and just like kind of shut things down. So when I go home, that's what I do. I'll watch TV, I'll watch reality TV. I kind of just like go in my own zone. I'll doom scroll. And I just have a way of shutting that part of it out. I also find myself not really watching true crime anymore unless it's for research. Whereas before I did watch it more for, I don't want to say entertainment because that's the wrong way to describe it, but just how
Right.
normal people would watch a
Mm-hmm.
Dateline, like out of interest. And so I don't find myself doing that. I feel like I consume enough of that content as it is. So I just try to kind of do, yeah,
Yeah.
brainless, mindless things that help me just go to a different place.
Oh, I get that. And
I
Mhm.
does
watch
it
The Traders.
ever?
I love The Traders. Derek's a friend.
Oh,
So
Oh, really?
love
nice.
that.
That's
Oh,
amazing.
Derek is so sweet. Yeah, another detective.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. We had such a great season. It was
It was
just,
really good. You guys did great.
oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone was, and
And
you had a
everyone
lot of great
became so
people.
close. So it's like they wanted, I think, a lot more drama, but like everyone honestly became friends our season, which was really nice.
Yeah. Well, and I
Yeah.
have to say, when you pick your true crimes that you're covering, is it because something stands out to you? Is it the victim that stands out to you? Is it the situation of the crime? What is it?
It really depends. So a lot of the times it's because we're getting a lot of requests. So people are like, we want to know more about this breaking case that's happening right now. What can you find out? We want to hear about it. So sometimes that's why we'll cover a case. A lot of other times, too, it's a victim or a family member themselves reaching out. We have a case submission tab on the website right now. I think we're just from the start of the year, we're at like 1,500 submissions of
Oh my
different cases that people want us to cover. A lot of them that happen, things that happen to them directly. And again, it's like if I can look at it a different way or deliver it a different way, or if there's more information, then that's usually when I want to cover it. A great example, again, is just going back to Ruby Frankie. There was this huge documentary, The Devil in Our Family, that just released on Hulu, I think a week or two ago. And after that, I did a deep dive into her because they barely even scratched the surface of what that lunatic did. But then there were so many questions about the husband. Like, okay, the husband went away from the family for a year. He wasn't there watching her abuse his kids. Even before that, he was complicit. They had like a family vlogging channel, and they would advertise on this channel like their punishments for their kids, taking their bed away, the door off the hinges, making the child sleep on a beanbag. When the 6-year-old forgot their lunch at home, made them go hungry at school, and like they documented this and were proud about this and put it out
Whoa.
on the internet. And so when this documentary came out about Ruby, people were like, well, why is he getting off scot-free, even though he wasn't directly tied to the abuse when they found the kids, that he knew what was going on. He enabled Ruby, he allowed this. So then today, actually, I released a huge deep dive just on Kevin and contradicted a lot of his statements from the interview because I have that original footage from stuff that he put out there publicly where it's like, no, you don't get to come in now and play like you want to just have
Yeah.
custody of your children, that Ruby was the bad guy. You also were equally a part of this, you know?
Right.
Yes. And you know what kind of trips me out about that and is I'm so happy by the way that you're doing that with the dad because I've always felt the same way. Like, how are you just letting this happen to your kids? But also think of those viewers who would watch them talk about the discipline to their kids. Like, how did no one report that ever?
Right.
Right?
Some people do report, some people call CPS, and a lot of people then did, what I guess you could call like a soft cancellation where they just stopped watching their
Mm.
content and tried to just boycott it that way. And a lot of people sometimes will say like, oh, well, they were brainwashed because Jody Hildebrandt, which is the therapist who came in, who I think is a cult leader, they're like, they were brainwashed. But it's like, yes, but there was also the behavior happening before Jody even entered the picture where he did co-sign it and where he was okay with it. And
Wow.
it's just, yeah, how do you even allow that as a parent? It's your job to be the protector and stop things. So for you to just sit by and then leave for a year knowing that your children are in the hands of your wife and this woman, it's so irresponsible. But now he's coming in as though he's the martyr.
Right.
Ugh.
I mean, do you feel that the justice system does fail a lot of people?
It does. Unfortunately, it does. Not always, but I think more times than we would like to believe. I mean, look at Casey Anthony. Perfect example.
Yeah.
There was absolutely no justice for her daughter, Kaylee Anthony, and she was found not guilty. And now and I get it. That's what our system is built on. And you get a defense and you have a fair trial. But where's the justice then for her? And now Casey's back on TikTok, like trying to say she's a legal advocate. It's like, are you out of your mind?
It's insane. I couldn't believe
It's
it.
insane.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It just bothers me because, and that's why I love what you're doing, is it constantly puts these people, murderers, like on this pedestal. And it's like, that's not okay.
No.
And I get she was found not guilty, but I mean, come on.
I mean, big time, come on.
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I feel like, and this is just little old me, not educated, but I felt like that the justice system needs to evolve. It's like it hasn't evolved to the modern times. And that's why people like you are so glorified, because you're the modern times. The way you do your detective work, the way you analyze. And I feel like we don't get that. And the one thing, just seeing what you've gone through with certain things in the court systems, it's like, it depends what kind of lawyer you have. And it shouldn't be that way.
Or judge. Judge is the biggest. It all depends who your judge is, how are they that day. And also what I've come to realize is they bring their personal issues a lot to the table when it comes to family law. And I just, what I would love to try to change just from personal experiences is just a bigger fight for our kids and our children. I just feel like because there are so many cases, divorce is high and child abuse is high. And I just feel like we don't take the time for each case of like, should this be 50-50? Should this child ever go back to this parent? Should this child be with either parent? And I feel like because they're trying to get through so many cases a day, or the judge just doesn't have a personal interest, or because they've gone through something, that's where I feel the failure is for children, for even protecting women, and even dads, whatever the story may be, like anything in family law. It's just, from what I've experienced and what I've saw and all these stories that I've heard, I've just been like, oh my gosh, we could have just taken an extra 10 minutes on this case when you're in there and just listen. And that was the one thing that shocked me, is like the lack of like hearing both sides, or just looking at facts or evidence in front of your face when you're just like, no, it should be like this. This is how we're going to call it. It's been so eye-opening to me, but also like really sad, because it was also a period of time where I'm like, you're so helpless as a parent. Like that once you're in that courtroom, you have no control of your child whatsoever. And whatever that person who is looking at all of us, the judge, they get to decide your child's future, their life, their next moment after, this case is closed or they dismiss us. And that was like so wild to me. I remember just sitting there like almost wanting to faint, like I have no control of my child.
I completely agree. That's such a scary and vulnerable place to be in that's exactly what it is. It's like you're handcuffed. You have no control over what that outcome is going to be that day. And unfortunately, it's just it's so understaffed. There's so few resources, and there's so many cases, like you said, that people either are rushing to make a decision and they're using their own personal bias to make that decision, rather than like looking at things objectively and coming to whatever the best interest of the child conclusion is. And that's how we get the cases that slip through the cracks too, where maybe it's escalated abuse, or a situation where a child now has been withdrawn from school and they're being homeschooled, and CPS isn't going in and checking on them. And then 7 months later, you're like, oh, the last time somebody had eyes on this child was 7 months ago, and now they're missing. And it just, I wish that there was an answer, because I feel like a broken record. I always say the system is failing people. We need to get better resources, but I don't know what that answer is, because even if there were more people who were applying to have these positions, it's tough because it's not a great paid position. The benefits aren't fantastic either. So it's not really an appealing position for a lot of people. And so you just have these caseworkers and these legal advocates, and their stack is so high that they can't get through them all. And unfortunately, it's like that's when people start to slip through.
Yeah.
It's like all this AI stuff will freak me out, but it's like for those type of jobs, I'm like, yeah, put a robot in there and like AI, like get something that's like, will be on schedule, do the details. Like, it kills me. Now, because I can't watch this stuff at night because I get nightmares. Do you ever get nightmares from going deep on these stories?
I do, but it's weird. It's like so weird to say. It's like not nightmares when I'm sleeping, but like in my day to day. It's like I
Oh,
carry it with me and I feel it. And like, I don't know if it's caused me to have more intrusive thoughts or if I'm just now hyper paranoid about a lot of things, especially with my own kids and what they're exposed to. But I definitely carry it with me all the time. So it's not necessarily like a horror nightmare where I wake up scared, but it's almost like a reality nightmare where I'm fearful of just the state of our world, to be quite
wow.
honest, and what people are capable of, because I have seen just true evil that people out there, even family members, close friends, that they're just evil and they're
Wow.
capable of some of the most atrocious things.
See, that would get me. Now, do you call your sister and you're like need to let it when you need to let it go?
We can't wait for Dateline Friday. We got to chat now.
Or even if you're feeling these things, like these scary things, is your sister your outlet or is it your husband?
It's my sister.
Yeah.
I love my husband, but this stuff freaks him out. He's never even listened to a single episode that it freaks him out. And
Oh
so
my God.
it's my sister. And fortunately, she now works with me. So like we're in the same space every day working together. So I'll just like go in her office and I'll be like, I need to just decompress right now. Like talk me off the ledge. What is happening?
Yeah.
And just she'll bring me back to reality.
Oh my
Ellen, I
gosh.
love
the
that.
beauty of sisters.
Right. Well,
Yes.
and then because how you can investigate so well and like just find things that people don't. Do you have your girlfriends come to you at all? Like, okay, so I'm dating this guy. You need
All the time.
Oh
All
my
the
God, I
time.
love it.
And do you do it?
Literally, my brother texted me last night and he's like, hey, can you track who owns this phone number? We're getting weird messages. I was like, I'm on it. I'll try and see what I can come up with.
That
my
is amazing.
gosh. I love that.
Yes.
That's actually, we need a friend like that.
No, we do. I mean,
Call me anytime. I'll be
Yeah, I
there
was gonna
for
say,
you.
You got any more space
I
in your
might.
friend
I think
group?
I might have a new one for you. Have you heard about
Ooh.
the guy with the cat coming to the speakeasy looking for me?
No.
You haven't heard about this?
No.
Emily had to talk to me Saturday.
Oh my.
Yeah.
I would say what's wrong with people, but you would give us a whole list.
I know. So I don't know if I could hear that.
Too much.
Like, I'm aware. Now I'm aware. Yeah.
Well, Annie, one last question. What does the future look like for you? Any fun projects coming up or anything, going on?
Yeah, still doing everything with the podcast. We have new episodes that come out every Monday and Thursday, and it's on all podcast platforms. But working on some documentaries right now with some families and some cases that I've covered in the past where their loved ones unfortunately were killed. So doing some documentaries closely with them, partnering on some potential TV stuff in the future. So some exciting projects. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
I love that. Keep doing what you're doing. It's so
Honestly,
amazing
thank
what you're
you.
doing.
Your work is
Thank you
absolutely
so much.
incredible. And I know that it might bring so much to you in your day to day, but gosh, what you do for so many families and to educate all of us. It's like you hit two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
Like you do a lot. So it's incredible. Before we let you go, we always like to leave our audience with a little inspiration and affirmation. Is there a quote, a mantra, or something you live by that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
It's a great question. Yeah, you know what? Actually, there is something, and I wish that more people would hear this and take this to heart, especially women, but always trust your gut, trust your instincts and your intuition, because that truly is your first line of defense. Your intuition is there to protect you and to shield you. So don't ever feel like you need to apologize for it or that you need to second guess it. Just trust your gut all the time.
Oh,
Amen. That
Right?
is so true.
and the times I didn't trust my gut, I failed myself.
100%. There's so
Yeah.
many times where I'm like, nah, I'm just being overly paranoid. And then I look back, I'm like, I wish I would have just listened to myself. Like I was
Yes.
right.
All the time.
Mhm.
It's
all the
crazy.
time.
And I know, it's like, and I know and remember every single moment, whether it was a business deal, as whatever it may be, just in personal life and professional life, every time I have interest in my gut, I'm like, yep, that's
Yeah.
right.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Annie, for coming on our podcast. We're so excited. And then to all of our listeners, please check out Annie on her podcast, Serialously with Annie Elise. And then you can also see her YouTube series, 10 to Life, on YouTube. And she's on Instagram and TikTok at _Annie Elise, which you will absolutely love. Well, Annie, you have a great week.
Yes.
And we look forward to your new case.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Definitely.
All right. Bye.
Bye.